regional reform. And before we get to councillors, we actually have 3 delegations registered. And I'll call up the first delegate, and that is Jan Dai. You're up first.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. It's been a while since I've spoken on this podium. I think it's the first time for this council. Is that true? Don't know? Yes? No? Fair? Yeah. Anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm here to really talk about the governance review that's going on here. What did I press this out there? So, what do we value? We all value in our community, we all value innovation, we value barn raising, and to make those things happen, we all want a supportive government, a supportive governance system that's really going to help make that all work. So, as part of being innovative, I always like to start with a thought experiment when we're doing something new and different. So I say, for a thought experiment, let's amalgamate all the startup incubators and the small business centers. They all do the same thing, right? They help businesses get going. Certainly a single leadership team would be far more effective than the 12, 15, 20 of them we have around the region now. Not only that, it'd be far easier for an applicant to just put in one application instead of 2, 3, 4, or 5 or 6. Surely it's got to be far more easier for that. And then think about the single voice to all the angel investors and government funders. Of course, it'd be much easier for them to figure out where all the innovation is happening. So why don't we just do it? It's a no-brainer, right? Well, I can hear all the snickers already from all of you and from everybody in the community. Jan, it's a bit of an ecosystem there. You don't have all the facts. You don't know how complicated it really is. They all cooperate with each other. It's an ecosystem. We all work together really, really well. And you know what? You're right. Absolutely you're right. And what else is right? It's much less responsive to the diverse needs of all those individual type of companies who find their own niche in terms of where they have to go. A big centralized organization would be much more monolithic. It'd be much more bureaucratic, much slower to respond to the quick and evolving changes that we have here. Big organizations, fewer checks and fewer balances. And you can get a concentration of the power in a few hands. That creates problems. So amalgamating them all, it's going to stifle innovation. It's going to stifle barn raising. We all want to make sure that that doesn't happen. In municipal government, it's as complex as all those ecosystems are. It's an extremely diverse set of services. It must work as a big, large economic unit. Yet it must be responsive to all those different needs of all the members around the community around us, around everybody. And it's got to do that as cost efficiently and sustainably as anybody else. And we all know it's much easier to innovate and be cost effective and nimble on your feet when you are small. And what are some of those examples we see about that? Well, we see that all over our municipal government here. A lot of the cities, they learn to copy from each other's successes and veer away from some of their failures. There's all kinds of partnerships and collaborations going on between all levels of government and even outside to the school boards and to the universities to make things much more effective. As a city, we have to respond to a regional growth plan. We have to comply to it. We can work together within a local context with a global or region-wide type of direction and vision. And that happens. And here are just some of the examples of the history that we have. It's a long list. I think many of you are familiar with this list. GIS, RepNet, emergency planning, tourism, economic development. I remember when I was back in council, year 2004, 2005 timeframe, we were dealing with some of the issues around the Rim Park financing fiasco. We reached out to Kitchener and set up the Joint Initiatives Task Force, which found savings as well, which are continuing as we move forward today. Cooperate, it's in our best interest as municipalities to cooperate, to finally drive costs down, because that's better for everybody. And then I think about our barn raising mentality. You know, the barn raisers, the Mennonites, they all have their individual farms, they all have their individual businesses, they all compete against each other. But do they really need to amalgamate in order to raise a barn, to be counted, to create or promote a band? Of course they don't amalgamate that, because you don't need that to get your voice heard at different levels of government. We often hear that our current system's got too many politicians. We only have 4 full-time politicians. Dave, you happen to be one of them, right? There's a chair and the 3 city mayors. Everybody else is part-time. They're active in the community. Many access to government, if people get access and find out, hey, this is my point of view. We hear all those. And I'd rather have 52 part-time politicians who aren't dependent on that next paycheck for their job, because it's their career, to represent me. Those are the people who are listening to us. So I would say all those voices, that fosters innovation and that fosters barn raising. So what's best for Waterloo Region? Well, what does the data say? So these are just the Canadian Institute, the C.D. Howe Institute, the Monk School for Global Affairs, Montreal Economic Institute, Fraser Institute. Those are big reputable studies who've done thorough studies around the world based on the impact of amalgamation. And they all say amalgamation does not produce a more efficient municipality, both from a governance perspective and from a cost perspective. And there are institutes in the United States who say the same thing. There are institutes in Australia who say the same thing. There are European institutes who say the same thing. It's what's out there. It's what the rules are. And why is it? Why is that from an economic perspective? You say, except for some of the big ticket items like public transit, waste management, and water and wastewater, the economies of scale tap out at about 250,000 people. So after 200,000, 50,000 people, it becomes more expensive to provide the same service because you got the bureaucracies and the processes you need to be able to manage that. That is all very well established through all of these research studies. So you got Kitchener, maybe an ideal size of a municipality. Kitchener and Cambridge is the same thing. They're very efficient municipalities to run on their own, and they have a natural incentive to work together as they move forward here. So, overall, two-tier has been working extremely well. Before we do anything, and this is the message we have to try to get out, what's the fundamental problem that really needs to be solved? We talk about things, well, we should talk to too many people to get something done. Is that a governance issue or a diversity of opinion issue? Make sure we understand what those differences really are. And let's just evaluate the alternatives and not run into the quick idea of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. That sometimes happens. Sometimes you forget we have a small problem here, but 98% of everything else is working really, really well. Let's make sure that a solution doesn't upset the rest of what the system is supposed to do. And then we determine our course of action. And we've proven time and time again that we can do this really, really, really well. So as we move forward, do I know what the fundamental answer is? No. Do I have some ideas where perhaps you can have a little bit more regional cooperation? Yes. But overall, is the system working well? Yes. Is amalgamation the answer? No. But what we can all do is continue to foster our sense of communication and cooperation. Make sure our method gets heard, and that we go back and see what those studies are saying and say, this is what the fundamental reasons really are, why we should not be going to a single-tier system. So that's my presentation. Thank you all for holding this today.
Thank you very much, Jan, for your presentation, and thank you for your prior service at this horseshoe. Questions for the delegate? Seeing none, thank you. Delegate number 2, Greg Mikolenko. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you. My name's Greg Mikolenko. I live on Menno Street in downtown Waterloo. I've had, now retired, I'm 74. I environmental studies at the University of Waterloo. At one time or another, I spent 10 years on the Ecological and Environmental Advisory Committee of the region. I'm a current member of the Community Garden Council for the region. I served 2 years in the Tree and Forestry Advisory Committee to the City of Cambridge, and I'm involved in the local Birdwatchers Club with the Grand River Environmental Network and so forth. So what I came to appreciate through all this is that wonderful stuff happens right down at the individual or local level, and there's important work in setting policy and programs from up above and knowing how to work with the different levels and to get people cooperating. I think we've done a really good job in the city of Waterloo and in the region. And I think this is a very timely motion, so I thank you for constructing it so well, so clearly, and in something that you could even go on Twitter with, almost. Wrong glasses. Okay, the problems with the review. I think it's too hurried to be comprehensive and insightful. It's too focused on short-term costs, what they call efficiencies, and includes no opportunities for interactive community engagement. They do have what they call an online forum, but that means you plug in some words in a box and you don't know where it goes or who's going to look at it and whether there's going to be any meaning attached to it. Have, for community involvements, some engagement where you get people. So if you see a need, I think keep that in mind, and we'll be helping you out. I believe the two-tier model does a good job in achieving long-range goals, in setting regulations, and running programs that accomplish their objectives. Things are generally sorted out at appropriate scale and in the best way. The motion reflects this very well. A few comments on the motion. As mentioned in the third phrase, experience elsewhere, as well as analytical studies, show that amalgamation rarely saves money and it reduces opportunities to profit from citizen engagement. Make sure that you cite the documents and studies that support so that they can go into the record. That becomes an important tool, or some people would call it a weapon, to forcibly get these good ideas home. Also, if possible, include an appendix that provides more information about the 2010 plebiscite results. This might not come in from any other quarter to the regional review or to the provincial government. So I suggest that this would be a good thing to do. On the matter of service delivery, 3 words that are in the motion. I'm very weary of provincial accusations about red tape. Most of this is unfounded. I would rather label our bylaws, regulations, and directives as safety belts or life preservers. They keep us safe and they make us very happy at reasonable cost. I think also in regard to this matter of so-called efficiencies, I think an alternative focus is recognizing expenditures as investments with enduring long-range payback. We need to distinguish between costs and investments. And some of our finest achievements in the region have necessitated initial upfront costs with payback prospects. But the long-term view has shown that there are handsome long-term paybacks. And the measure I'd like to cite is one of my colleagues, Jim Robinson, for about 20 years was involved in research in water conservation, and that brought in all these small things of efficient toilets, and you could get a rebate and work at different levels of the cities with private individuals and corporations. And the result has been that the region has reduced per capita water consumption by 50%. Took 20 years, 30 years almost, but we did it. And the payback is a saving of $1.5 billion because we don't have to build a pipeline to Lake Erie. Now that doesn't show up in a provincial review that only looks at current, very limited and detailed costs. So find a way to let them know that you are very efficient and you save tons of money for the future as well, for long range. Let's see. I urge you to make one small addition to the resolution where it says efficient service delivery. I would suggest you add efficient and effective service delivery. So not only does it save money, but you meet a target, you satisfy needs, and I think that would be helpful. Fostering civil engagement and collaboration, I'm glad you've mentioned that because you do that well. There's an art to good governance, and successful programs relies on building well-crafted institutions that can capture creative and visionary ideas, produce good policies, design effective programs on a sustainable basis. So this isn't just numbers we talk about, it's the qualitative things. And I think that gets done very well. Another thing is that I love the way that from the top down there are places where ideas can come from many different quarters. One important one was the idea of the curbside blue box waste management program came from an individual citizen, Niall Ludolf. He convinced the Kitchener City Council to do a pilot project. Then when there was a meeting of a consultation by the region for a new waste management facility, which they thought of just as being a new landfill out in New Hamburg, a teenager got up to the mic that was opened at this well-conducted consultation and said, "Hey, why are we just talking about a landfill? We live in this neighborhood in Kitchener. We've got this lovely blue box program. Everybody loves it. The kids are responsive. I've heard some of my fellow students taunting another one, well, get your parents to put their blue boxes out. Everybody else is doing it." So we ended up in the region of having the first waste management system with a built-in high-quality conservation measure, the Blue Box program, which then spread to elsewhere in the Ontario. So we've saved the province lots of money and lots of municipalities through a good example. Also, you speak about delivering services desired by constituents through an accountable and transparent model. That's really important, and thank you so much for doing that and also recognizing that that's what you need to do. One thing that's looming in the future is the climate change crisis, and we only have 12 years to avoid a planetary disaster. Unfortunately, we're used to governments at different levels ignoring the elephant in the room. Now we are in a new and appalling situation in Ontario. The Ford government is the first that is trying to shoot the elephant itself rather than just ignore it. And because of this abrogation of responsibility, much action on climate change crisis, and we can't avoid taking action, will have to be at the municipal level. We have no other choice. So please take some bold initiatives and start planning right now. And I urge you to frankly communicate this to the Provincial Review Committee. I'd like to end with one little example of what I think was one of the nicest examples of the big happy jumble of wonderful things that can result from the interplay of politics and participation in this community. I had a student when I was teaching environmental studies who was a single mom on welfare living in subsidized housing up in Keats Way, built by this city. Her toddler was only 3 years old. She was hopelessly busy, having to go by bus long distance to daycare and back and go to school and so on. The park across from her social housing complex, Keats Way Woods, and it was being rather torn to pieces by the young boys from the development running around. She also saw at the same time that little girls had nowhere to go, nothing to do. So she asked me, as her semester project, could she form the Keats Way Woods Kids Club and put things to rights. I said, I think maybe you can do it. So she formed that. They had a special opening day, and I went out to it. Everyone was there. CKCO was broadcasting from a booth. About 8 different pizza companies were delivering free pizzas. The city of Waterloo trucks rolled up with tons, literally mulch and tools, and showed the kids how to get busy with the wheelbarrows. And the girls were included. This was really novel. And it was a splendid day, all told. And I think that showed that we had regional policy on various matters. The city stepped to it. The private sector joined in. And a feminist perspective built things for the future in a way that we're only learning to recognize now about gender equality. So I think you really are governing for the people. My wife says that I'm a bit of the people, so I could say that. And you're progressive. I think you show what conservative really means. And I'd like to end by saying we can't afford to be like ostriches that dug our heads into the sand and ignore these big things. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you for your past service and your professional and personal here today, and your suggestions that we'll add if this passes, which I will send into the government, as well as the suggestion of adding effective and efficient service delivery into the final resolution. And do you have questions from Council? Council Vasek, please.
Through you, Chair. I don't have a question, but I'm just very touched by your examples of everyday people and how small government is one way to really bolster everyday people. So I'm just very touched and wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, our last speaker for today is Kevin Thomason. And I know, Kevin, when you gave this presentation, it's the same one from the region. I think you did it in 6.5 minutes. So technically you have 5 minutes, but I'll give you 6.5.
No problem. We'll see. Not as tall as the other guys. There we go. Honorable Mayor, members of council, and guests. My name is Kevin Thomason, and I am the owner of 1115 Cedar Grove Road, Waterloo. For years, I've volunteered with a wide variety of concerned community groups and worked with citizens such as these 3 past mayors of Waterloo, who I helped draft this open letter back in 2010, clearly rejecting amalgamation. There's a copy on the screen there before you. Quite simply, most amalgamations don't work and have been shown time and time again to result in significantly higher costs, less representation, and loaded, less responsive bureaucracies. Achieve the expected efficiencies or cost savings, and many amalgamated municipalities end up investigating ways to de-amalgamate after learning that bigger isn't always better. The City of Waterloo and the City of Kitchener have consistently rejected amalgamation since 1857 when it was first proposed. Amalgamation was most recently rejected resoundingly in a 2-to-1 ratio by the citizens of Waterloo in 2010 and has been rejected by every other municipality in Waterloo region at various points in time. Don't even talk to anyone in Cambridge about amalgamation. They're still reeling from 1973. The reason why amalgamations are so consistently rejected is because we're unique communities, separate cities with very different neighborhoods and ambitions, priorities and approaches. Each official plan demonstrates how much our goals, challenges, budgeting, and decision-making processes differ. I urge you to sit through a Wellesley Township Council meeting and contrast it to a City of Waterloo or Cambridge Council meeting. The rural Mennonite issues they give so much time to differ greatly from the rapid transit, university, or high-tech issues grappled with at these urban councils. We already have very successful custom governance solutions tailored to the needs of each neighborhood and community. According to the Harvard Business Review, between 70 to 90% of all corporate mergers and acquisitions fail. Any CEO knows that alignment is essential, and companies need to share common strategies, goals, and ambitions if a merger is to succeed. However, our communities have very different goals and ambitions. Some want to grow, some want to stay just the way they are. The City of Waterloo has an official environmental first model that has taken extraordinary steps over the years to protect vast tracts of natural area, even repealing our urban boundary, while other area municipalities have prioritized development instead. The people around this horseshoe know just how much our approaches and priorities can differ. If leading companies run by the most highest compensated experts can't even be successful 70 to 90% of the time with far more resources, what makes us think that we can be more successful than we already are under a rushed review by Doug Ford, who is determined to cut staff budgets and resources at every possible opportunity? Is it absurd that you've had so little time or opportunity for dialogue with Ken Sealing and others leading the provincial review? We currently have an incredible array of councillors from all walks of life representing our communities and neighborhoods. Yet, with only 4 full-time municipal politicians in the entire region, and so many councillors putting in almost full-time hours for low compensation, we're going to be hard-pressed to find a more effective and economical solution. Why would we want to get rid of so many hard-working people, but for just a few, likely more expensive councillors who will struggle to have the same broad impact? As other amalgamated cities have discovered, people tend to participate less in larger cities. Volunteer rates decline, there are fewer neighborhood initiatives such as local arts and cultural events, fewer sporting activities and teams, as well as often the loss of local newspapers when there's no longer a local municipal government to report on. Being left with only one big single regional newspaper isn't likely going to be as good as the diversity of community papers we currently enjoy. Finally, amalgamation isn't necessary. Many of the most successful cities in the world are actually clusters of communities. Silicon Valley is comprised of 40 different municipalities. London, England, where I was this past weekend, is made up of 33 different boroughs, and judging by the number of cranes and the amount of new construction I saw, it is thriving. And Boston is a staggering 282 municipalities. While some may say we need amalgamation to make a bigger impact globally, it actually appears that almost all the cities consistently rated amongst the best in the world are actually diverse clusters of communities working together. In conclusion, why would anyone want to pay more for fewer services, less representation, diminished democracy, and reduced control while facing a significant loss of community and identity, along with the staggering odds that things aren't going to work out nearly as well as expected? We are already the envy of the world. Our community structure isn't a problem to be solved. Our diverse community of communities working together are a large part of the reason for our success. Please pass this motion against amalgamation and send a strong message to the province. Thank you.
Wow, Kevin, you left time on the table here. Here's a good one. You're getting faster and faster.
Knew I could do it.
Yeah. Excellent. Questions for Mr. Thomas?